The Windrunner family is considered by many to be the most tragic family in World of Warcraft lore. Loremaster Windrunner was the Ranger General of Silvermoon. This means she was the commander of the Forest Riders, an elite group of Blood Elf Rangers, and also the commander of all Quel'Thalas military forces, and in charge of the defense of Silvermoon. Quel'Thalas is the country, basically, of the Blood Elves, and Silvermoon is the capital. Loremaster was also the mother of the 4 Windrunner siblings: Illyria, the oldest, Lirath, their brother, Sylvanas, and Verisa. Illyria, as the oldest, was meant to be the next Ranger General after her mother, but she chose instead to join the Forest Riders and quickly made a name for herself, eventually becoming Forest Rider Ranger Captain. The main enemy of the elves at this time were the Amani trolls, and both Illyria and Sylvanas became respected fighters and tacticians through their many skirmishes with this hated and powerful enemy. Then the Second War began. This is the war between the orcs from the Dark Portal and the humans of Lordaeron. King Tyrannus Menethil called on an ancient debt that the Sunstriders, the ruling house of the elves, owed the Arathi bloodline, the ruling house of the humans. Now, the elves might just have ignored this call for aid, but Illyria believed that the Horde could eventually become a threat. So she led her rangers to South Shore to join the alliance. She worked closely with Khadgar and Turalyon, the leaders of the alliance forces, to expel the orcs from Lordaeron, and then, hearing that the Horde threatened the lands of her people, she went with them to protect Quel'Thalas. Now, since Turalyon becomes Illyria's love interest, we'll talk a little bit about him. High Exarch Turalyon is one of the first 5 paladins of the Knights of the Silver Hand, along with 2 other names you might recognize, Uther the Lightbringer and Tyrion Fordring. Unlike the other paladins, Turalyon was previously a priest rather than a warrior. He served the Alliance army with distinction during and immediately after the Second War, and he was second in command to Lord Anduin Lothar, the supreme allied commander. During the siege of Blackrock Spire, Lothar was struck down in combat against Orgrim Doomhammer. It was General Turalyon that picked up Lothar's battle standard and broken sword and rallied the army of the Alliance to victory over the Horde, capturing Orgrim and driving the orcs back to the Dark Portal. As the Lion's lieutenant, Turalyon was named Lothar's successor as Supreme Commander by the monarchs of the Alliance. So, back in Quel'Thalas, Illyria is reunited with Sylvanas, Lorthamar Theron, her second in command, and Haldoran Brightwing, the guy who becomes Ranger General after Sylvanas turns into an undead banshee. Spoilers. Now, the reason I'm telling you all of these names is because in the second expansion this year, the good guys, I'm guessing, are going to be heavily featured, and maybe a few of these names are going to turn into cards. Here's where things start to get dark. Loremaster, their mother, and Lirath, their little brother, are killed by Amani trolls, who lost no time in allying with the orcs against their hated enemy, the elves. Sylvanas becomes the new Ranger General, and their mother's ancient bow, Thasdorah, Legacy of the Windrunners, is passed to her eldest daughter, Illyria, who swears vengeance for the 18 of their kin that lay dead. Driven by grief and hate at the death of so many aunts and uncles, and especially her little brother, Illyria views the orcs as vermin to be exterminated, and she travels the land with her forest riders, hunting down the orcs trapped behind after the end of the war and the closing of the Dark Portal. Now, there was a brief point in time after the end of the war when Illyria took comfort in the arms of Turalyon, and that resulted in the birth of a son, Eretor. But she ultimately decided to focus on revenge, and they separated and hadn't seen each other in a while. When she hears that the Alliance expedition is going to enter the Dark Portal and take the fight to the orcs on Draenor, Illyria joins them eagerly. But before she left her sisters, she melted down the necklace that her mother had given her, embedded with an emerald, a ruby, and a sapphire. The emerald she kept for herself, the ruby she gave to Verisa, and she sent the sapphire to Sylvanas with her trusted lieutenant, Verena. This item can be found in-game, and it is called the Lady's Necklace. It is a very well-known quest in World of Warcraft because returning it to Sylvanas, who lost it when she became a banshee, triggers the lament of the Highborn. On Draenor, Illyria finally realizes that the fight of the Alliance against the Horde is bigger than her need for vengeance, and she rekindles her relationship with Turalyon. Do you remember when Ner'zhul starts opening hundreds of portals, and it gets out of control, and Draenor is torn apart, and everyone in it not sent back through the Dark Portal is lost in the Twisting Nether? Well, a whole bunch of Alliance heroes were lost in the Twisting Nether, including Turalyon, Illyria, and Khadgar. Given the low likelihood of their survival, Illyria and her comrades were presumed dead, killed in the line of duty. They are honored to this day for their sacrifice. A statue of Illyria has a prominent place in the Valley of Heroes, just inside the gates of Stormwind City, the main city of the Alliance, along with Turalyon and Khadgar. I'm going to read what they say in the statues because, yeah, it's just cool. Renowned troll hunter of Kel'Thalas, lead scout and intelligence agent for the Alliance expedition that marched into the orc homeworld of Draenor. Your heart flew straight as any arrow upon the wind, sister. You were the brightest of our order. You were the most beloved of our kin. Sylvanas Windrunner, Ranger General of Kel'Thalas. Former Lieutenant to Lord Anduin Lothar, Knight of the Silver Hand, High General of the Alliance expedition that marched into the orc homeworld of Draenor. Iseris Thar no Derador, by blood and honor we serve. You were the right hand of justice and virtue, old friend. Your name will be honored in our halls always. Lord Uther the Lightbringer, Knight of the Silver Hand. And the one for Khadgar, former apprentice of Medivh, supreme commander of the Alliance expedition that marched into the orc homeworld of Draenor. Never did one so selflessly delve into the dark heart of magic and warfare. We wish you well, bold wanderer, wherever you are. Antonidas, Archmage of Dalaran. For years, one of the most often asked questions of the devs at BlizzCon was, where are Illyria and Turalyon, and when will we see them again? To sum up a very long and complicated story that would fill a book, in the Twisting Nether, Illyria and Turalyon meet members of an organization called the Army of Light, made up of many different species that fight the Burning Legion across space and time. They travel in the Army's dimensional ship, Xenadar, and undergo many adventures and transformations. Turalyon is infused with the light, making him immortal. Good thing, because as a human, he wouldn't have lasted the 1,000 years they were away. And Illyria is infused with void light, making her the first of the void elves. This, as you might imagine, makes it hard for the two to touch. Returning at last in the expansion Legion of World of Warcraft, imagine Illyria's horror when she learns her younger sister Sylvanas is War Chief of the Horde. So Sylvanas mourned her sister's death, became Ranger General of Silvermoon, and fell in love with a human. Oh, wait, did I miss that part? Yeah. Nathanos Maris became the first and only human ranger, as well as the only ranger lord, the highest rank in the Forest Riders hierarchy below ranger general. Now, this inclusion in their ranks was not well received by the elves, who were very prejudiced against humans, but Sylvanas persisted in training him, arguing that he would be a loyal ally, which turned out to be true. His treatment at the hands of the rest of the elves caused him to stay apart, but Sylvanas visited him often, leading to rumors of their romantic relationship. Both Sylvanas and Nathanos' lives would end at the hands of Arthas Menethil. Sylvanas and her rangers fought him so valiantly and caused him so much anger and frustration that when he finally ran her to ground and she demanded a clean death, he denied her, saying that after what she put him through, the last thing he would give her was peace. So the Lich King killed Sylvanas and tore her soul from her body with Frostmourne. As a banshee, she was enslaved to the will of the Lich King and forced to kill her own people, those she had sworn to protect above her own life. And the Lich King did not make her a mindless ghoul. He left her enough self-awareness that she could understand all that she did, but be unable to resist. She likened him to a puppet master, pulling her strings. Her body was locked away in a metal coffin, but this she used to her advantage. When the Lich King became weakened in battle, and many of his scourge were freed of his mental hold on them, Sylvanas, who had been watching and waiting for just such an opportunity, escaped, took her body, and began to amass power and an undead army of her own in order to pursue her vengeance and survive in this new undeath she found herself in. Freeing all the undead she could from the Lich King's dominion, she organized them into a new nation of their own, claiming the royal catacombs beneath the destroyed Lordaeron and calling it Undercity, and her people the Forsaken. The Forsaken, having carved a functional empire of their own, and with growing numbers by the day, knew that the next step to realizing their vengeance upon Arthas was to secure their place in the world. Though Sylvanas had won her civil war in the Plaguelands and successfully conquered the ruins of Lordaeron, how long the relatively small faction of the Forsaken could keep their holdings was unclear. So Sylvanas looked around for allies. She sent numerous ambassadors to the Horde under War Chief Thrall, though the Forsaken's admittance as an official member state was not universally welcomed. The kind-hearted Tauren of Thunder Bluff proved to be the most promising contact. Specifically, Archdruid Hamul Rune Totem saw the potential for redemption in Sylvanas' people, even though he was fully aware of the Forsaken's sinister nature. Thus the Tauren convinced War Chief Thrall, despite his misgivings, to forge an alliance of convenience between the Forsaken and the Horde. This alliance of convenience has granted the Horde a better footing in the mostly alliance-controlled Eastern kingdoms, and in turn, with the Horde's protection, the Forsaken were able to keep their holdings in Lordaeron. At some point, Sylvanas also freed her former disciple, Ranger Lord Nathanos Maris, from the Scourge's cold grip. Nathanos was named the champion of the Banshee Queen and took up residence on the Maris stead to train and direct his queen's new undead champions. You are given a quest if you are Alliance to find and kill Nathanos, and this is the quest text. Do you know how many Ranger Lords exist in this world? How many human Ranger Lords have ever existed? Nathanos' accomplishments were unprecedented. He was a tactical genius, responsible for alliance victories spanning a decade of conflict. And now, the champion of the Forsaken. No, this cannot be. Order must be restored. Gather an army, hero. Return to the plagues with your army and destroy the Blight Caller. Oh yeah, that's what he's called. Nathanos Blightcaller. I wish you luck. Truly you will need it for this battle. In Undeath, Sylvanas still considers herself one of the foremost protectors of Kel'Thalas, and repeatedly offered assistance in the form of supplies and troops to the Blood Elves. She still has love for her people and identifies with them. Though the Sindore initially declined most of Sylvanas' offers, fearing a trick, the beleaguered elves eventually allowed Sylvanas to station Forsaken soldiers in their lands. Sylvanas played a large part in convincing Thrall to accept the Blood Elves into the Horde. When the Northrend campaign to defeat the Lich King began, Sylvanas convinced her old companions Lorthamar Theron and Heldurin Brightwing to send a force of Blood Elves to help, reminding them that it was through her that they were welcomed into the Horde. When they doubted her motives, unable to trust her new undead form, she answered that all she desired was the strength to defeat their greatest foe. After the death of the Lich King, Arthas Menethil, Sylvanas went alone to the Frozen Throne. While irritated that she was not there to see him fall, Sylvanas took solace in knowing that the work she had begun in the forests of Kel'Thalas, when she first stood against him and tried to protect her homeland from his assault and that of his undead scourge, was at last complete. Arthas was dead. With her life and unlife's goal over, Sylvanas could think only of the bright fate that had waited her before Arthas tore out her soul, and she prepared to hurl herself from the citadel onto the Serenite spikes below, the only thing capable of destroying her completely. As she contemplated the end of her long journey, 9 Valkyr encircled her, granting her visions of her past. Sylvanas ignored them and hurled herself off the Frozen Throne. Sylvanas sees a vision of her people's future. Without her leadership, the bulk of the Forsaken are sacrificed by Garrosh Hellscream in a failed assault on Gilneas. At the bulwark, Apothecary Lydon organizes a last desperate counterattack against the invading Alliance forces. As the tide turns against them, the Forsaken throw themselves into raging fires rather than face the onslaught to come. As the vision ends, Sylvanas finds herself floating in a dark void where there is only terror, cold, hopelessness, fear, and regret. She also sees the ghost of Arthas, and is surprised to find that all he is at this point is a frightened and lonely little boy. Looking at the man who had inflicted such torment, Sylvanas admits that had her soul not been broken, she might have actually felt pity for him, despite what he had done to her. As Sylvanas realizes that this realm of anguish is to be her eternity, the Valkyr appear again. Led by Anhild, the Caller, they offer the Dark Lady a pact. Instead of allowing Sylvanas to reside eternally in this terrifying realm, Anhild will take her place if she binds herself to the remaining Valkyr, a powerful vessel through which they can continue to exist as more than slaves, their fates intertwined. Sylvanas accepts the pact and is returned to the realm of the living, surrounded by the 8 remaining Valkyr. From this point on, Sylvanas lives to create a life for the Forsaken, to make them powerful and to destroy their enemies. She is able to create more Forsaken using the Valkyr to raise the dead, since the Forsaken cannot reproduce. A lot of stuff happens. Several expansions go by. The Burning Legion attacks. The current war chief of the Horde, Vol'jin, is killed. And he passes the mantle of war chief to the leader of the Forsaken, the Dark Lady, the Banshee Queen, Sylvanas Windrunner. She looks surprised too. Okay, now we talk about Verisa, the youngest of the Windrunner sisters. She looked up to her two older sisters and tried to emulate Sylvanas in particular. Too young and inexperienced to take part in the Troll Wars or the Second War, she did not see battle until after the portal had been closed and the elves started mopping up the orcs that had been trapped behind on Azeroth. One of her first assignments was to escort a human wizard named Ronan to Hasek, one of the eastern ports of Lordaeron. But when they arrived, there were no ships. Ronan was trying to get to Khaz Modan, the home of the dwarves, and so Verisa and Ronan appealed to a nearby group of Wildhammer dwarves to help them by flying them there on the back of their griffins. He didn't at first tell her the point of his quest, but after, when they had gotten to know each other and he trusted her, she found out he was trying to rescue the Queen of the Dragons, Alexstrasza, who was being enslaved by the magical artifact called the Dragon Soul. With the help of Verisa and the group of dwarves, Ronan took the Dragon Soul from the orc Necros Skullcrusher of the Dragon Maw clan and destroyed it. Their powers fully restored, Alexstrasza and the other dragon aspects attacked Deathwing, who had been trying to steal Alexstrasza's eggs to bolster his own black dragon flight, and they forced him to flee. Not long after this adventure, Verisa and Ronan were married. They survived the attack of the Scourge, unlike Sylvanas, as they had been traveling Azeroth as ambassadors for the Alliance, for King Taranis and the Kirin Tor. Later, Verisa would bear twins, Giramar and Galadin, twin boys, who were blessed by Nosdormu and the Bronze Dragonflight for their courage in assisting Alexstrasza, and her consort, Coriolstraz. In Dalaran, Verisa created a militant faction of High Elves called the Silver Covenant. After everything she and her family suffered at the hands of the Horde, she understandably does not trust them, and that now extends to the Blood Elves. Even those who used to be her own people, she rejects after they joined the Horde. The Covenant controls the Alliance-exclusive district of the Silver Enclave in the city of Dalaran. The guards they employ are Silver Covenant Guardian Mages who expel Horde players once they get too close to the Enclave's outer walls. Verisa did not want the Sunreavers, the Blood Elf faction of Horde in Dalaran, to be admitted into the Kirin Tor, but she was ultimately overruled. When Jaina Proudmoore called for aid to defend Theramore Isle against an overwhelming attack by the Horde, Verisa came with her husband Ronan to help. However, after the battle, she was informed that the Blood Elf Thalen Songweaver, a Horde traitor within the Kirin Tor, had been rescued during the attack. So Verisa was off with a scouting party in Dustwallow Marsh when Garrosh Hellscream used a mana bomb to destroy Theramore and all its inhabitants, including Ronan. Verisa returned to Dalaran to mourn, and accompanied Jaina to plead with the Council of Six, the ruling mages of Dalaran, to take action against Orgrimmar in retaliation for Ronan's death. But they refused. They would not go to war against the orcs, for they vowed always to remain neutral. Much as Illyria and Sylvanas, for a time Verisa was consumed by the desire for vengeance, for her husband's death, even going so far as to plot with Sylvanas to poison Garrosh's food during his trial, when it became apparent that the death sentence was not going to be his fate, rather life imprisonment. During this time, Verisa and Sylvanas bonded talking of their past, their lost loved ones, and the lives they had both left behind. Hoping to keep her sister by her side, Sylvanas offered her a place in the Forsaken, to be co-ruler, and Verisa agreed to think about it. The following court day, Verisa was forced to witness Ronan's last moments in Theramore through the vision of time, leaving her in tears. Fueled with anger and grief at seeing her husband's selfless sacrifice, she left for Tirisfal Glades, where she met with Sylvanas, who had provided the poison, a particularly potent strain that would no doubt give Garrosh a painful end. Verisa's increasing affinity for her soon-to-be home pleased her sister greatly, though Sylvanas had not given her the full story. The Forsaken would never accept a living ruler. So she planned to give Verisa a painless death and resurrect her as a powerful banshee like her, so that the two could rule together forever. Then Verisa thought of her 2 sons, about them growing up in Undercity, and she knew she couldn't do it. She told Anduin Wrynn about the poison, leaving the decision up to him what to do about it, and left to join her children in Dalaran, with only a letter for Sylvanas to explain why she had changed her mind. Her letter was a great blow to Sylvanas, who had allowed herself to be very vulnerable with her sister. Illyria and Turalian's son, Eretor, was raised by Ronan before his death, and Verisa, after they disappeared into the twisting nether, presumed dead. When they return, about 20 years later, by Azeroth time, and ages and ages according to Nether time, he is at last able to meet his parents, and Verisa sees her sister again. And they plan a family reunion with Sylvanas. The 3 meet in Eversong Woods. Illyria calls Verisa, with her silver hair, Little Moon, and Verisa calls Illyria, with her golden hair, Lady Sun. They talk of the past and all that happened on Azeroth since Illyria disappeared. The Alliance Horde war, escalated by Garrosh Hellscream, the death of Ronan, and Verisa's talk with Sylvanas at Garrosh's trial. Although concerned about talks of Sylvanas' darkness, returning to their homeland has given Illyria hope of the family starting anew. Sylvanas appears to join them, and Illyria greets her, calling her Lady Moon. They walk to the undead portion of the Ghostlands, and Sylvanas tells her of how Arthas Menethil led the Scourge to desecrate Kel'Thalas. She summons undead skeletal horses for them to ride to their ancestral home of Windrunner Spire, and they fight together against the mindless undead along the path. Along the way, they play a game called One is a Lie, in which they each make 3 statements where one is a lie. Illyria accuses Sylvanas of taking advantage of her grieving younger sister and using her to murder Garrosh Hellscream. Sylvanas in turn reveals what Verisa left out of her story, that it was her idea in the first place, and what Sylvanas regarded as her lack of nerve led to Garrosh surviving and starting the 3rd invasion of the Burning Legion. As they fight, Sylvanas uses her banshee powers to kill the mindless scourge still gathered around Windrunner Spire, and Illyria is disgusted by her brutality and transforms into her void form to fight, declaring that the sister she knew is gone. The Sylvanas I loved is gone. All that is left is a wretched, obscene mockery of my sister. I had no choice regarding my fate, but you, sister? You left your son. You left our brother. You left us. And now you return, a mere vessel for the Void's power? You are but a shadow of Illyria, an abomination. You call me an abomination? Are you not? Transformed? No, twisted by a fallen Naru. Stop it! Neither of you was there when I needed you. You both let me think you were dead. Do you know what that did to me? You were my heroes. We have all lost so much. Must we lose everything? Again? The sisters cease their fighting long enough to cleanse the spire, and then part. But before they leave, Verisa runs after Sylvanas. There is one last thing I must say. I wanted to tell you that I was a coward. You asked me to stay with you. I said yes, and then all I did was send you a letter to refuse. That must have hurt you. Whatever has passed between us, and whatever will, I am sorry. I hope one day you can forgive me. As Illyria and Verisa disappear into a portal, Sylvanas' dark rangers appear from nearby. My lady, we were waiting, but you did not give the signal. No, Anya. I will let them cling to their sorrow-filled lives a little longer. In the end, they will serve death. They will serve